Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about the novel The Lovely Bones, written by Alice Sebold. Now, before we go into the summary and explanation of this novel, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment so that the channel can continue to grow and so I know to keep making more videos. Now, this novel is very disturbing. It's a really great story. It really um, tells us about the story of Susie Salmon, but at the same time, it's a very sad story, and it um, really pulls at the heartstrings. So basically, what happens is in this novel we meet this family. It's the Salmon family, and Jack Salmon is the father, and Abigail Salmon is the mother, and they have a pretty good life. They have three children. The oldest is Susie Salmon, the middle child is Lindsay Salmon, and the youngest is Buckley Salmon. The kids are going to school. It's the perfect, really nice family, the typical family you would expect. Everyone's happy. The parents love each other and the kids are getting along. Everything's going well, everything is good. But everything doesn't remain that way for long. What happens is there's this man by the name of George Harvey that is a neighbor to the Salmon family. And the Salmon family doesn't know that George Harvey is a serial rapist, and he's also after he's done raping his victims, he kills them. So what happens in the novel, one day while Susie Salmon is walking home, George Harvey invites her to his house. She comes in. She was a little bit reluctant, but she does come in. He brings her to this place, and then he forcibly rapes her, and then kills her. He cuts her into pieces. He takes her body, and then he drags it in a in a bag or in a large bag, and then he buries her. And then the parents, they're looking for Susie. They're trying to find Susie, but they can't because she's dead, and it's the neighbor that did it. It's George Harvey that killed her, and they're looking for Susie throughout that day. Days go by, they can't find Susie. Months go by, and everybody is going crazy, and they don't know what to do because their daughter is missing. Lindsay's sister is missing. Is missing Buckley. He's missing her sister, his sister, and the thing is, they don't know what to do. They haven't found the body. They don't know who did it. The police are asking questions. They've actually even went to George Harvey's house, but he's playing I'm an unmarried man. I'm old. I don't know anything you guys are talking about. And the thing is, like, he has the perfect cover up for nobody to suspect him. He's the individual that makes dolls, that makes model houses and model things such as like that. And he's just this isolated individual that no one bothers, and he's just weird all unto himself. He doesn't look like a predator, and the police didn't even see him as a predator or as a person who would rape and kill somebody. So what happens is months go by, and then they actually find a body part. They find Susie's elbow, a piece of her arm, and the police find this, and everybody's in shock. Everybody is fearing the worst. It's been a couple of months. They have this elbow now, and this pretty much means that something bad has happened to her. They can't really say that there's some hope that she's still alive, but at this point, if she is still alive, she's missing an arm, or her arm's badly damaged, or things are just not looking good. During the novel, what happens is Susie's father, Jack is kind of like going around. He began to have these suspicions that Harvey is involved or he's the cause of this. And one day during the novel, he actually goes over and he helps Harvey build this tent, and he kind of questions Harvey. He says, you know, my daughter died and all kinds of things. And Harvey, he says Susie's name, but he's kind of like, he doesn't act normally. So Jack, he has his suspicions, and he truly believes that it's George Harvey that killed his daughter. Now he doesn't have any proof. The police come over. He calls the police on George Harvey. They come over. They search his house. They can't really find anything because by this point George Harvey has killed several people, several young girls and women throughout his life. And he knows how to clean his tracks. He knows how to not leave clues for the police. And he had an alibi. So they can't pin him. There's no evidence, and he basically gets away with it. And the whole time, Susie's body is pretty much buried under the cornfield. So the investigation goes on. Jack and his wife Abigail, um, because of the loss of their daughter, their marriage is having some problems, and they're beginning to be more distant. Jack's not going to bed. Abigail is, she's crying here and there. She's just into this deep depression, and that's understandable because you lost your daughter. And the novel moves on, and the novel pretty much from this point on focuses on the impact that this death have on this family because they can't really pin it on George Harvey even though he did it. They try to find other people that they can pin it on. They even try to pin it on this one little boy at Susie's school that gave her a love note. The investigators found a love note, but they couldn't find any evidence that could pin it to him. Um, and so that went nowhere. So it kind of put this boy's life in a situation where everybody was thinking, okay, maybe he did it, but no one really had any evidence to firmly, convict him or bring him to justice, and it wasn't even him. So life goes on. In the rest of the book, we kind of like focus on Susie's family and what they're going through. And while this is happening, the entire time we are actually seeing this through Susie's eyes, and we are seeing her in heaven, and she, is in paradise, and she's looking down on earth, looking at the aftermath of her rape and murder, and she knows where her body is buried. She knows what George Harvey did to her, and she wishes she could just scream it out and let everybody know that it's George Harvey that did this to her, but she can't. She's in heaven, and um, she's dead. There's nothing that she can do. So what happens is we start to focus on the life of Lindsay, on Susie's sister, and Susie in heaven. She basically focuses on Lindsay's life, and she kind of tries to maybe even grow up through the life of Lindsay. She sees how Lindsay developed to become a woman, how she develops her crushes towards boys, and Susie's right there for the ride. She's there when Lindsay starts to like somebody, when Lindsay goes on dates, when Lindsay goes to school and later goes to college. So Susie for a good portion of Lindsay's life on her sister's life, she's following her in heaven and keeping track of what her sister is doing, and through that she's kind of like um, I guess keeping an eye on her, and also um, I guess living her life through the experience of her sister. So that's and the other thing is that Susie's death had a huge impact on Lindsay's life because after Susie's death, or after everybody believed that she died, a lot of people looked at Lindsay as the sister of the girl who died, or she's that girl. Somebody killed her sister, and That's the narrative that was around Lindsay for a good portion of her life after Susie had died, and a lot of people had these eyes of sympathy, the voice of sympathy, trying to tell her, we're sorry for your loss and all that kind of stuff. But Lindsay, after a while, she wanted to be her own person. She wanted to live her own life. She didn't want to, yes, she missed her sister. Yes, she cried over her sister's death. Yes, she felt the pain, but at the same time, she's a person too. Her parents were pretty much in this at this point being distant because they had lost their child, and her life is had pretty much taken um, a pause basically because they were all everybody was just focused on the death of Susie. So she had to fight through that and kind of develop her own identity, her own life, apart from just being the sister of the girl who died or possibly was raped and killed. So her life does develop, and sooner or later, she does develop her own identity, and she does become her own person. Buckley, him, the way he deals with it, it was, it was hard for them to tell, um, the parents to tell Buckley that his sister had died. And the reason why is because when Susie was killed, Buckley was 4 years old, and because of that, how do you explain to a 4 year old that their sister's dead? So slowly, Buckley does learn to cope with death, and I guess he had to learn how to cope with it and to understand it at a very young age. Now, the other significant thing that happens in the novel, because of Susie's death, we kind of like see a lot of ripples, a lot of changes to people's lives, and what ends up happening is Jack and Abigail, Susie's parents, they don't get a divorce, but they split up for a good amount of time. Abigail, the death of her daughter was very very hard for her. Everywhere she went, everywhere she her physical being went, she saw her daughter. She saw the face of her daughter. She remembered her traits. The things that she liked. So no matter where she went, she leaves her husband, and she even has an affair with the detective that was investigating Susie's murder. And but the thing is, like after she did that, she kind of realized that even that wasn't fixing her problem. She was trying to run away from the depression, the sadness of losing a daughter by having that affair with the detective. The problem is, she was just having these moments where the affair would help her forget, but as soon as you had a pause or that wasn't working, you go back to that sadness even harder because now you have this whole thing of you cheating on your husband. So the whole family it took this death very hard. It even came to the point where Jack got injured. He one night he took a baseball bat and he tried to go to the cornfield to confront George Harvey, but George Harvey wasn't even there. And then he gets hit and attacked by a high schooler that was with his girlfriend in the cornfields, and he got injured and that took him off his feet for a good amount of time. So the family did split up. We had Abigail going far away. She left the family for a while. Jack was recovering. Lindsay was trying to make the best that she can with her life. Um, and Buckley, he tried to grow up. We do see the grandmother of Susie, the grandmother of the children. She comes to live to the house, to live in the house, and she takes Susie's old room. And in a way, in the novel, we kind of see Susie's room become like a maybe like it almost seemed like a museum. It's like a room that everybody would walk in and try to remember Susie, or when you walk in it, it's almost like Susie was just there because she left her room. Her bed was unmade when she left for school that morning of that day that she died. And when you walk in it, you just see the unmade bed. It just looks like, she just left for a while and she was going to be right back. So no one ever really touched the room. But when the grandmother moved in, she she lived in the bedroom that became her bedroom, but she didn't really change that many things. Um, and so The family moved on slowly. Um, the family moved on slowly. The grandmother moved in. Everybody, Buckley grew up. Lindsay grew up. She started dating. She even got engaged. Jack became a little bit older. The death of his daughter did have a huge impact on him. And the grandmother was there to just help out and keep everybody on the right track. You know, after all this takes place, we do see George Harvey moving away. He didn't want to stay in that area for too long. Everything that they did, Lindsay even broke into his house to find some evidence, to see if there was some evidence to as to where he buried Susie. But the evidence that she did found did not help to discover her Susie's body. So George Harvey ends up moving away. He goes, to find his next victim. And the family really, after a long while, they do move on. We do see Abigail come back to Jack after he suffered a heart attack. He comes back. She comes back to Jack, and they pretty much resume their relationship. They never really talk about the affair, and I don't think Jack even knows about the affair, and that I don't think that it was ever even revealed to him. So they just reunite, and they never even had a divorce. So they just fall in love with each other again, and they both are aware of Susie's death. They don't try to push it away, but they realize that they do have to move on. So the family comes together. We see this a little kind of like a little party for Lindsay with her fiance. We see Jack and Abigail there, the grandmother, Buckley a little older, and they kind of toast to Lindsay for her getting engaged, going to be, by this time she's done with college, and she's planning for the future to have her own family, and the family just go tries to repair what they lost. Well, they can't really replace Susie, but they try to move on with what they have. And Susie's up in heaven. She's watching this, and she does say, "These are the bones of my death," because her death was heavy, very heavy on the family and on the community. And by this point, her body is pretty much decayed somewhere, and her family have somehow recovered. Um, from that whole affair, and they are the lovely bones of her death. That's what Susie says in heaven when she's watching all of this. Now, before the novel ends, I guess we do get some sort of justice because George Harvey, we see him in another place. He's trying to get his next victim, this teenager, young teenager, and he goes after her in the cold, and she was like, the cliche of a teenager texting on her phone, listening to music, not respecting elders and all kind of stuff. That it's a whole teenager cliche. And George Harvey, he goes after her, but the girl is like, "Why is this old man even talking to me?" By this time, George Harvey is extremely old, and what the novel tells us, it was during winter, and these stalagmites or stalactite, I don't know how to pronounce that, but these, you know, stalagmites, they fall down. He loses his balance, and he falls. He doesn't get up, and he basically freezes to death while he was trying to um, get another victim. In his mind, he doesn't really change. He's still a monster. He's still trying to rape and murder people. Because in the novel, while he was trying to get his next victim, this girl, um, he's like, "Oh, there's a woods right over there, and there's a young teenager. I can attack her and bring her to the woods." But before this even happens, he loses his balance, falls down, and freezes to death. And for us, we're really happy because he's just a horrible person that deserves punishment. We don't get a trial. We don't get anybody, like, no one ever gets closure as to how Susie dies. But I guess as the reader, we get you know, some sort of closure because we do see him dying. We do see him dying horribly. And there is this saying that people who are evil, people who are unjust, their deaths are always gruesome and unforgiving. So, his death was unforgiving. His death, he was froze. He was frozen. He just became um, basically ice because by the time somebody discovered his body, he was already dead, long dead. So the novel ends there, and it's, I guess, bittersweet. We do see the family coming back together. No one really lost their minds completely. People needed time to rebuild themselves, and they did, and they try to move on from Susie's death. So, all in all, a very good novel, very interesting story. And in terms of explanation and analysis, I would say that this novel does have a message of what happens to people after they suffered something unforgiving. Because there are ripples in this world that we sometimes never understand. Um, People are affected by what happens to people who are close to them. Susie's death not only affects her family, but it affects her entire community because everybody in this community, they thought that they were safe. They were it's a really nice neighborhood. This neighborhood where this rape and murder, took place in. It's a very safe neighborhood. Crimes don't happen. Crime doesn't happen there that much. Everybody is safe. Everybody is happy. The kids are doing what children do, playing on the streets. Everybody felt safe. And this man, George Harvey, just comes in and he basically ruins that whole thing. And everybody is just thinking who could have done this and which one of us or who lives in this community could have done this horrible thing. And the echoes of Susie's death really stream out. And the reason why her death streams out is because, it could have been any girl, right? It could have been any girl where George Harvey had taken that person's life. Another thing that does come up, or in terms of analysis that comes up, is how this family deals with the death of Susie. The father, he wanted justice. He wanted to fight for justice. He wanted to do anything that he could to, get George Harvey to face punishment, but he couldn't. And that was going to be his closure. That was going to be his revenge, but he couldn't do that. So that really took him down a very dark road. Um, when we go towards Abigail, Susie's mother, she thought going away or pushing the darkness, pushing that sadness away was going to fix her problem. She even tried on, going on an affair, and that didn't fix the problem. She still felt sad, and no one really understood um, what she was going through. And she, at the end, she realized she had to go back to her husband and to her family. Buckley was really mad at Abigail, at his mother, because when she finally came back, he said "F you." He's like, how could you abandon us? We were facing Susie's death too. By this time, he's a little bit older, and they were all facing through Susie's death. They were all going through a hard time, and I guess you can say it's kind of selfish because she just leaves them, and they're all facing it. She's not alone. They're all facing this grief, and you know, it's a double bath because maybe she just did need that time alone to figure out her life and to cope with that sadness. And Buckley, he tried to move on very quickly after he realized Susie wasn't coming back. He tried to make his own life and to make something out of his own life, but it was very hard because his parents were just so stuck in that one single situation that happened long ago that they kind of miss some of the upbringing of their own children because they were so stuck on losing Susie that Lindsay and Buckley's lives were impacted because they didn't have that much attention from their parents as they should. The grandmother, the grandmother is pretty much a caretaker. She comes in and she keeps the house up. She tries to keep more morale up. She does all that she can to keep the family intact. So that's a very important part of the family, and it does echo out into our world, as to there's a lot of bad things that happen to us, and it does really take a village to really repair those wounds. Wounds. Okay. So it does really take a village, to repair that and to get us back on the right track. And this family, they really had to depend on each other, to get back to who they were, to who they are. So that's a very interesting message. And even, I guess, maybe that, George Harvey didn't face criminal justice or the legal system, but he faced, I guess, natural justice. What I mean by that is, I think that his game, or his the morality that he was sporting, or I guess just the evil that he was sporting, was going to catch up to him sooner or later. And in his old age, he just, had a very dark and isolated death. So that's my summary. That's my explanation and analysis. I hope you guys like that summary. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment. And I'll see you guys in my next video.